He came home without a mission, but the white K9 at his gate seemed to be carrying one for him. Captain Marcus Reed did not remember the drive from Camp Lejeune to the little blue house outside Wilmington, North Carolina, not in full. He remembered pieces. The pale winter sun sliding across the windshield. The faint smell of rain trapped in the truck's floor mats. The dull ache in his left shoulder every time the tires hit a broken patch of road. He remembered the folded discharge papers on the passenger seat, the pharmacy bag beside them, and the silence that sat in the cab like a third passenger. For 15 years, Marcus had known what to do when the world got loud. Stand, breathe, count, move. Protect the Marine to your left and the Marine to your right. But home was not loud. Home was quiet, and that made it harder. The neighborhood looked almost too gentle when he turned onto Alder Creek Lane. American flags lifted softly from porch rails. A kid's bicycle lay in a driveway. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower coughed once, then went still. Marcus slowed in front of his house, a one-story place with white trim, a sagging mailbox, and a porch his mother used to sweep every Saturday morning before church. She was gone now. The house was his. The silence was his too. He cut the engine and sat there with both hands on the wheel, a broad-shouldered black Marine in a faded olive jacket, his hair cropped close, his face calm in the way men learned to be calm when falling apart would frighten everyone around them. A thin scar curved near his right eyebrow, old and pale. His eyes, dark brown and tired, stayed fixed on the porch steps, as if waiting for someone to come out and tell him what came next. No one did. Then he saw the dog. At first, Marcus thought it was a trick of the light, a pale shape near the front gate, half hidden by the low branches of the magnolia tree. But the shape moved. Slowly, carefully. A German shepherd stood just beyond the fence, tall and lean, his coat white as beach fog, damp at the edges, dust clinging to his legs, as if he had traveled far over back roads and ditches and open fields. His ears were high. His ribs did not show, but his body carried exhaustion in the way he held himself, proud but trembling, determined but nearly spent. Around his neck hung a worn leather collar, and from it, a metal tag flashed once in the afternoon light. Marcus did not breathe for a moment. White shepherds were rare enough. This one felt impossible. The dog stared at him through the fence with pale amber eyes, and something inside Marcus tightened so sharply it almost hurt more than his shoulder. No, he whispered, though he did not know who he was answering. The dog took one step forward. Not eager, not playful, measured, like a soldier approaching a line he had been ordered not to cross. Marcus opened the truck door. His boots met the gravel with a soft crunch. The air smelled of wet leaves, gasoline, and distant ocean salt. That Carolina smell that once meant homecoming and now felt like memory trying to become real. The dog did not bark. He lowered his head, sniffed the air, and made a sound so quiet Marcus almost missed it, a breath caught between a whine and a sigh. Marcus gripped the truck door with his good hand. Blizzard. The name left him before he could stop it. The dog's ears flicked. His tail gave one careful movement, then stilled. Marcus felt the world narrow to the space between them. 8 months earlier, on his last overseas deployment, Blizzard had been his K9 partner, his shadow through dust, noise, and long nights under hard stars. Blizzard had known the difference between danger and fear. He had known when Marcus was lying about being fine. Then came the final mission, the confusion, the evacuation, the paperwork, the sentence no handler is ever ready to hear. Missing during transport. Presumed lost. Marcus had signed forms with a hand that would not stop shaking. He had carried the guilt home like a second injury. Now the dog stood at his gate, alive, silent, and looking at him as if no distance had ever mattered. Marcus stepped toward the fence, slow enough not to startle him. Easy boy. His voice cracked on the last word. Blizzard pushed his nose between the iron bars, inhaled, and closed his eyes. That small act nearly broke Marcus. Recognition was not a shout. It was not music swelling or some grand miracle arriving with thunder. It was a tired dog breathing in the scent of the man he had refused to forget. Marcus reached over the gate with his right hand. Blizzard lifted his muzzle into his palm. His fur was cold. His skin trembled beneath it. Marcus swallowed hard. How did you find me? The dog opened his eyes, then lowered his head toward the tag at his collar. It tapped softly against the metal latch. Once. Twice. a tiny sound in the winter quiet. Marcus noticed then that the tag was not the standard issue one he remembered. This one had been scratched, dented, and tied on with a strip of dark cord. Something was etched across the back, not printed cleanly, but carved in hurried strokes by someone with a shaking hand. Marcus leaned closer, his breath slowing. Blizzard nudged the gate again, not asking for food, not asking for shelter, asking him to look. And as Marcus reached for the latch, the dog's tired eyes lifted to his, carrying a message heavier than any bark could hold. And for the first time since coming home, Captain Marcus Reed understood that the mission he thought had ended had somehow followed him all the way back to his front porch. The latch opened with a tired metallic click, and Blizzard stepped through as if crossing into a place he had already chosen long before Marcus understood it. He did not rush into the yard. He did not leap or bark or spin in the wild joy of ordinary dogs. He walked straight to Marcus, pressed his forehead against the Marine's thigh, and stood there trembling in the washed-out winter light. Marcus lowered himself carefully to one knee, ignoring the pull in his shoulder and the dull complaint from his ribs. The gravel was cold beneath him. The air smelled like damp earth and magnolia leaves. For several seconds, neither of them moved. A man trained to withstand loss and a dog who had crossed something larger than distance simply leaned into each other, breathing like they were remembering how. Marcus slid both arms around Blizzard's neck, gentle at first, then tighter when the dog gave that same broken sigh. "You are real," Marcus whispered. "Lord help me, you are real." Blizzard's coat was not the clean white Marcus remembered from the base kennels. It was streaked with road dust, burrs caught behind his ears, a faint smear of mud along one shoulder. His paws were worn raw at the pads, not bleeding, but tender, the kind of wear that came from miles of pavement, gravel, grass, and stubborn purpose. Marcus noticed all of it with the old handler's eye, cataloging what care was needed before he let himself believe in the miracle. "Come on," he said softly. "Let us get you inside." Blizzard did not move toward the house. Instead, he turned his head back to the gate, then to Marcus, then lowered his muzzle toward the metal tag hanging from his collar. It touched Marcus's wrist with a small cold tap. Marcus paused. "I saw it," he murmured. "I am looking." His fingers found the tag. It was not government issue. The metal was thinner, cut from something irregular, maybe an old key plate or a piece of equipment marker. The edges had been sanded just enough not to cut. The front bore Blizzard's name, but not in the clean stamped lettering Marcus knew. Someone had scratched it by hand. On the back, under a film of dirt, were 4 words and a number. Marcus wiped it with his thumb. The letters came clearer. "Read. Tell him. Mile 47. Marcus stared until the words seemed to shift in the light. The neighborhood around him faded. The porch, the mailbox, the cold grass, the sound of a distant truck on Market Street, all of it slipped behind the sudden pressure building in his chest. "Who wrote this?" he asked. Blizzard looked toward the road again. His ears angled forward. His body stiffened not with fear, but with urgency. Marcus had seen that posture 100 times overseas. It was not panic. It was a signal. Pay attention. Follow. Trust me. But home was supposed to mean no more signals. No more unfinished routes. No more numbers that pulled old doors open inside his mind. Mile 47. Marcus searched his memory. There were thousands of mile markers in North Carolina. Highways, rural routes, old county roads, training corridors near the coast. Then the number struck him with such force he had to grip the fence. Mile. Marker 47 sat on an abandoned service road west of Jacksonville, near an old military transport route used during joint exercises before deployment. 8 months ago, that route had been the last place Blizzard was documented before the transport logs went cold. Marcus turned the tag over again. The words were still there. "Read. Tell him. Mile 47. His throat tightened. Only a handful of people called him Reed instead of Captain. One of them had been Staff Sergeant Aaron Cole, his closest friend from the unit, a calm Alabama Marine with a laugh that made hard days feel lighter. Aaron had been assigned to assist with the K-9 transfer after Marcus was evacuated for medical care. Aaron had promised him, hand on the hospital rail, "I will get your dog home, Reed. You have my word." 2 days later, the report said communication had been lost during a severe coastal storm, records damaged, transfer delayed, K-9 unaccounted for. Aaron was reassigned before Marcus could speak to him directly, then disappeared into the machinery of official silence. Not missing, not confirmed, just unreachable. That had almost hurt worse. Marcus stood slowly, the tag still in his hand. Blizzard stepped closer, eyes locked on him. The dog knew. Maybe not the words, maybe not the number, but he knew the weight of what he carried. Marcus looked toward the house, where his discharge papers waited on the truck seat like proof that his service had ended. Then he looked back at Blizzard, at the dust on his white fur, the worn pads, the patient fire in his eyes. The dog had not come for shelter. He had not come to be rescued. He had come to finish a promise someone else had started. Marcus opened the front door and let Blizzard inside long enough to drink from a stainless steel bowl and rest on the braided rug near the entryway. But Blizzard would not lie down. He drank, lifted his head, and stared through the open doorway toward the road. A thin line of water dripped from his muzzle to the floor. Marcus watched him, feeling the old rhythm return beneath the ache, not the rhythm of war, but the rhythm of duty. He took his keys from the hook, reached for the worn leash he had never been able to throw away, and clipped it to Blizzard's collar with hands that no longer shook. "All right, partner," he said, his voice low and steady. "Show me what I was not told." Blizzard stepped onto the porch, the winter light catching his white coat until he looked almost silver, and Marcus followed him out, knowing that whatever waited near mile marker 47 had been waiting for both of them. The truck rolled out of Alder Creek Lane with Blizzard standing steady in the back seat, his white head lifted between the front seats, his breath quiet against Marcus's ear. The leash lay coiled beside him, not needed now, because the dog's whole body was already pointed toward the road ahead. Marcus drove west beneath a low Carolina sky, past shuttered bait shops, pine stands, and long stretches of winter grass browned by cold salt air. The sun had begun to sink, turning the edges of the clouds the color of old brass. Every mile pulled something from him. Not fear exactly. Memory. He remembered the last morning before the evacuation, the smell of hot dust and machine oil clinging to his uniform, Blizzard sitting close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He remembered Staff Sergeant Aaron Cole leaning against the side of a transport vehicle, smiling with tired eyes. Aaron had been 36, broad across the chest, with close-cut hair, warm brown skin, and the easy patience of a man who could calm a room without raising his voice. He had grown up outside Montgomery, Alabama, the son of a church deacon and a school nurse, and he carried their kindness in small practical ways. Extra socks for younger Marines. A quiet word before bad news. Coffee handed over without asking. When Marcus was loaded for medical transport, Aaron had bent down so his voice would not carry. "You just heal, Reed," he had said. "I will handle Blizzard." Marcus had tried to answer, but the medication made the world soft at the edges. Blizzard had pushed his muzzle under Marcus's hand one last time. Aaron had placed his palm on the dog's back. "I give you my word," he had whispered. That was the memory Marcus kept sealed away because promises hurt worse when no one explained how they were broken. A whine from the back seat pulled him back. Blizzard was staring out the right window, ears forward, nose working. They were nearing Jacksonville now. Traffic thinned. Neighborhoods gave way to service stations, storage lots, and old roads that ran between dark lines of pine. Marcus turned onto County Road 19, then onto the narrower access route the tag had dragged from memory. The pavement changed under the tires, smooth highway giving way to cracked asphalt patched in uneven squares. A faded green sign appeared ahead, half hidden by vines. Mile 41. Marcus's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Blizzard shifted his weight. Mile 42 passed in silence. Then 43. The air inside the truck felt colder though the heater hummed low. Marcus glanced in the mirror and saw the dog's eyes fixed on the road like two small lanterns. "You remember this place," Marcus said. Blizzard did not look away. At mile 45, the land opened into a forgotten corridor of scrub pine, ditch water, and chain link fencing gone gray with age. A storage depot sat far off to the left, its buildings low and windowless, with weeds pushing through the gravel lot. Marcus slowed. The official report had never mentioned this road. It had said coastal storm, delayed transfer, paperwork loss, animal unaccounted for. Clean words. Safe words. Words that left no fingerprints. Blizzard suddenly stood, paws braced against the seat, and gave one sharp bark. Not loud. Exact. Marcus eased the truck onto the shoulder. Ahead, The marker for mile 47 leaned at an angle, its reflective numbers dulled by rain and dust. Beside it was a narrow maintenance road blocked by a rusted chain and a sign that read "No through traffic." Beyond the chain, the road dipped into trees. Blizzard began to pant, not from heat, but from urgency. Marcus turned off the engine. The quiet rushed in. Far away, a crow called once. Wind moved through the pine needles with a dry whisper that sounded almost like paper being folded. Marcus stepped out and felt the chill immediately. His shoulder ached from the drive, but the ache seemed far away now. Blizzard leaped down carefully, landing with a soft grunt. He did not wait for command. He went to the chain, sniffed the ground, then looked back. Marcus unclipped the leash from his belt and attached it, more for himself than for the dog. "Slow," he said. Blizzard obeyed for 3 steps. Then he found the scent. His body changed. The tiredness vanished. His head lowered, tail straight, ears set, every line of him becoming purpose. Marcus followed him past the chain, boots crunching over old leaves and broken gravel. The maintenance road wound beneath pines so tall they caught the last light high above, while the ground below had already gone blue with shadow. After 50 yards, Blizzard stopped at a shallow ditch. He sniffed along the edge, then pawed at a patch of weeds. Marcus crouched and brushed the grass aside. There, half buried in mud, lay a strip of weathered fabric, olive green, with a faded name tape still stitched across it. "Cole." Marcus's breath left him in a slow, painful line. He picked it up with trembling fingers. It was not proof of a crime. It was not an answer. But it was real, and real was enough to make the silence around him feel suddenly full. Blizzard pressed his nose against the fabric, then turned deeper toward the trees. A few yards ahead, something pale hung from a branch at eye level, twisting gently in the wind. Marcus stepped closer. It was a second marker, handmade from a torn piece of field bandage, tied carefully where a trained dog would see it. On it, written in faded black ink, were 3 more words. "Not gone yet." Marcus stood frozen beneath the pines as dusk settled around him. Blizzard looked back once, amber eyes steady and sorrowful, and Marcus understood that mile marker 47 was not where the story ended. It was where Aaron Cole had started, leaving a trail for the only partner loyal enough to bring someone back. The words on the torn field bandage seemed too small for the weight they carried. "Not gone yet." Marcus read them once, then again, while the last color drained from the sky and the pine woods settled into a blue, breathless hush. Blizzard stood a few feet ahead, his white coat dimming into the shadows except where the fading light caught the curve of his shoulders. He was not pulling now. He was waiting. That was what made Marcus's chest tighten. A young, restless dog would have charged forward. A frightened dog would have turned back. But Blizzard waited like a partner who understood that some doors inside a man had to open before his feet could move. Marcus folded the weathered name tape in his palm and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Then he touched the handmade marker with 2 fingers, careful not to disturb it. The ink had faded, but the strokes were deliberate. Aaron had been alive when he wrote it. Alive, aware, and trying to send something into the world through the only witness who could not speak. Marcus swallowed against the pressure in his throat. "All right," he said softly. "We keep going." Blizzard lowered his nose to the ground and moved beneath the trees. The maintenance road narrowed until it became little more than 2 muddy tracks divided by weeds. To their left, an old drainage canal ran black and still, reflecting crooked strips of evening sky. To their right, the chain-link fence of the forgotten depot stretched into darkness, sagging in places, its warning signs bleached nearly white. The air smelled of pine resin, wet soil, and rust. Every few yards, Blizzard paused to check the ground, not hurried, not confused. He had done this before. Maybe alone, maybe more than once. Marcus followed, his boots slipping slightly where fallen needles hid patches of mud. His shoulder throbbed, but he let the pain become background noise. A Marine learned early that pain was information, not always an order. After 100 yards, Blizzard stopped near a culvert where rainwater had cut a shallow groove under the road. He sniffed the opening, then gave a low sound from deep in his chest. Marcus crouched and shone his phone light into the hollow space. Nothing moved inside. No danger. Only damp leaves, a crushed paper cup, and something tucked beneath a flat stone. Marcus reached carefully and pulled it free. It was a small waterproof pouch, the kind used to protect field notes from rain. His pulse changed. He opened it under the beam of his phone. Inside was a folded map, softened at the creases but still readable, and a short note written in the same hand. Read, if Blizzard brings you here, trust him more than the file. Do not call the office line. Find Mrs. Cole before anyone else does. Marcus stared at the note until the screen dimmed, and he had to tap it awake. Mrs. Cole, Aaron's mother. He knew her only through stories, and one photograph Aaron kept inside a clear sleeve in his Bible. A smiling woman in a blue church dress standing beside a porch full of red geraniums. Aaron used to say she could hear worry over the phone before he spoke a word. Marcus had never called her after the report. He had wanted to. He had even found her number once, written on an old deployment roster, but shame had stopped him. What could he say? I am sorry your son vanished inside paperwork, and I came home with no answers. I am sorry the dog he promised to return disappeared too. I am sorry I survived the Part 1 remember and failed the Part 1 do not. Blizzard nudged Marcus's elbow, grounding him. Marcus exhaled slowly. You kept this safe, he whispered. The dog's ears flicked at his voice. In the quiet, the small sounds of the woods grew sharp. A branch creaked overhead. Water moved somewhere under the culvert. Far off, tires passed on the main road, then faded. Marcus unfolded the map. A red circle had been drawn around the old depot, and a line led from mile marker 47 toward a cluster of abandoned maintenance sheds near the back fence. Beside one of the sheds, Aaron had marked a small cross. Not a grave. Marcus refused to let his mind use that word. A marker. A place to look. He slipped the note and map back into the pouch and tucked it into his jacket beside the name tape. Then he stood, knees stiff, heart steadying around a decision. Not tonight, he told Blizzard, though every part of him wanted to follow the trail until darkness swallowed them both. If Aaron left this for us, we do it right. Blizzard looked toward the deeper road, then back at him. For a moment, Marcus thought the dog might resist. Instead, Blizzard stepped closer and leaned against his leg, accepting the command with a tiredness that revealed how much he had already given. That trust hurt Marcus more than disobedience would have. They walked back toward the truck under a sky now dark enough for the first stars. At the chain, Marcus stopped and looked once more toward the road behind them. The woods gave nothing away. No confession. No explanation. Only the faint movement of pine branches and the quiet witness of a dog who had carried a message across months of silence. When they reached the truck, Marcus opened the rear door and helped Blizzard in, lifting gently when the dog's sore paws hesitated. Blizzard sank onto the blanket in the back seat, but kept his head raised. Marcus stood outside a moment longer, phone in hand, looking at the contact he had found from the old roster. Eleanor Cole. His thumb hovered over the call button. The screen glowed against his dark skin, small and bright in the cold. He imagined Aaron's mother in some Alabama kitchen, maybe washing a dinner plate, maybe sitting beside a radio, maybe still listening for a son whose absence had never been explained in a way her heart could accept. Marcus pressed call before courage had time to leave him. It rang 4 times. Then a woman answered, her voice soft, wary, and worn thin by waiting. Hello. Marcus closed his eyes. Blizzard lifted his head in the truck behind him, as if he recognized the sorrow in that single word. Marcus held the phone closer and spoke with the care of a man stepping onto holy ground. Mrs. Cole, my name is Captain Marcus Reed. I served with Aaron. I think your son left me a message. Marcus's thumb hovered over the call button longer than necessary, as if the warmth of the truck's seat and the soft weight of Blizzard at his side could delay the words he was about to speak. The line clicked, a single tone that carried through the quiet cabin of his truck. Then, a voice answered, soft, cautious, and edged with a patience honed by years of waiting for news that never came. Hello. The single word hung in the air like a fragile thread. Marcus drew in a slow breath. Mrs. Cole, he said, keeping his voice steady, careful not to carry the tremor in his chest. My name is Captain Marcus Reed. I served with your son, Aaron. I believe he left a message for me before he was transferred. A pause followed, long enough for Blizzard to lift his head and glance at Marcus, as if measuring the weight of what was to follow. A message, the woman replied. Her voice quavered, not from weakness, but from the echo of years spent holding on to hope that had no shape or form. Marcus exhaled. Yes, ma'am. It was meant for me. For Blizzard, too. He has been waiting for the right moment to lead me here. Blizzard pressed his cold nose against Marcus's hand, leaning into him. The warmth from the dog was a tether, a reminder that what had seemed impossible was now tangible. Outside, the last light of day melted behind the pine line, casting long shadows over the maintenance road and the scattered leaves, making the world feel both vast and intimate. He wanted me to find you, Marcus continued. The map, the notes, the markers, they were all for you, for us, to understand what he intended. There was silence on the line, long and expectant, until a faint sound, almost a whisper, reached Marcus through the phone. I will meet you, Mrs. Cole said finally. I will be there. Marcus allowed himself a small exhale, letting the tension ease slightly, though his chest still carried the echo of the months of uncertainty. Blizzard shifted in the back seat, body alert but not anxious, ears catching every faint sound from the road behind and the forest around them. Marcus reached down to scratch the base of Blizzard's ears, feeling the coarse, yet comforting texture of the white fur, streaked slightly with dirt from their trek. Good boy, he murmured. You kept your word. The dog let out a quiet exhale, eyes never leaving the road ahead. Marcus started the engine, letting the low hum fill the cab, a companion to the faint rustle of wind through the pines. Every mile now carried them closer to understanding, to Eleanor Cole, to the traces Aaron had left behind. Marcus thought about Aaron's voice, the laughter and steady instructions that had guided them both through nights and dust storms, and he felt a weight lift, not of questions answered yet, but of a bridge being built. Blizzard's presence made it tangible, a living compass pointing towards something that mattered beyond maps and markers. They drove in near silence, punctuated only by the soft scrape of tires on gravel, the distant call of a night bird, and the subtle shifts of Blizzard's pause as he adjusted to the turns of the road. Marcus realized that trust had not been given lightly in this relationship. It had been earned in the heat of sun-baked deserts, over miles of unknown paths, and through the fragile, unspoken understanding that a dog and a Marine could share a mission without a single word spoken aloud. Now, that trust was guiding them to a quiet meeting, a reunion that promised answers not just for the past, but for the lingering emptiness left by uncertainty. The truck wound through the shadows of the trees, the headlights cutting ribbons of light across wet foliage and the occasional reflective marker. Blizzard sat tall, poised, a sentinel whose patience had carried months of waiting, miles of unseen travel, and now the soft hope of connection. Marcus let the warmth from the heater and the weight of Blizzard beside him settle into his shoulders, grounding him for what lay ahead. As the faint outline of a driveway emerged from the dark, bordered by magnolias and the soft shimmer of a porch light, Marcus knew that they had arrived at the place Aaron had intended, the place where a son's care, a mother's patience, and a dog's loyalty converged into something bigger than any single step or choice could convey. He parked slowly, leaving the engine running just enough to keep the cabin warm, and looked at Blizzard. The dog's amber eyes caught his, steady and clear, the depth of their shared history contained in that gaze alone. All right, Marcus said softly. This is it. Blizzard leaned against his leg, ready to move forward, carrying not just the memory of the past, but the promise that some messages, no matter how delayed, always find their way. The porch light glowed above the small white house like a candle kept burning for someone late coming home. Marcus sat for a moment with both hands resting on the steering wheel, the engine murmuring beneath him, while Blizzard watched the front door with a stillness that made the air feel sacred. The house stood at the end of a quiet lane outside Jacksonville, a modest rental with blue shutters, a narrow porch, and 2 clay pots of red geraniums flanking the steps. Marcus recognized them from Aaron's stories before he recognized the woman who opened the door. Eleanor Cole stepped into the light wearing a soft gray cardigan over a blue house dress, her silver-streaked hair pinned back, her face gentle but worn by the long discipline of waiting. She was not tall, but grief had given her a kind of height. She held the doorframe with one hand, not as if she might fall, but as if the world had shifted beneath her and she needed a moment to let it settle. Marcus turned off the engine. The sudden quiet was deep. Blizzard gave one low sound, not a bark, almost a breath with memory in it. Eleanor's eyes moved from Marcus to the white dog in the back seat, and her lips parted. "That is him," she whispered. Marcus opened the rear door, but Blizzard did not jump out. He stepped down slowly, head lowered, as if he knew this porch belonged to a mother. The dog crossed the gravel path with careful paws and stopped at the bottom step. Eleanor covered her mouth. "Aaron sent me one picture," she said, voice trembling. "He said this dog looked like snow that learned how to pray." Marcus felt the words strike him softly, like something remembered from church as a child. Blizzard climbed one step, then stopped again, waiting for permission. Eleanor bent down with effort and held out her hand. The dog pressed his nose into her palm. Her shoulders shook once, but she did not break. She stroked the fur between his ears, and in that small movement, Marcus saw the invisible bridge between a son, a soldier, a dog, and all the words that never made it home. "Mrs. Cole," Marcus said, removing his cap though he was no longer in uniform. "I am sorry I did not come sooner." Eleanor looked at him then, really looked, taking in the healed scar near his eyebrow, the stiffness in his shoulder, the careful way he stood. There was no anger in her face, only a tired kindness that made the apology harder to bear. "You were hurt too, Captain Reed," she said. "Aaron told me that." Before the call stopped, Marcus swallowed. "He called you after the transport?" Eleanor nodded slowly and stepped back from the door. "Come inside." The house smelled of lemon polish, coffee, and something sweet cooling in the kitchen, maybe pound cake, untouched. A small table near the hallway held framed photographs. Aaron as a boy in a Little League uniform. Aaron at graduation. Aaron in dress blues beside Eleanor, both smiling under a chapel awning. Marcus paused before the last picture. Aaron's hand rested over his mother's shoulder, his grin wide and unguarded. Blizzard sat beneath the table without being told, eyes on the photograph as if he too recognized the man inside the frame. Eleanor brought a folder from a drawer in the living room and placed it on the coffee table. Her hands were steady now. 2 weeks after they told me Aaron had been reassigned, this arrived by mail. No return address, just my name. Marcus sat across from her. The room was warm, but he felt cold along the spine. Eleanor opened the folder. Inside were copies of transport forms, route maps, and a handwritten letter sealed in a plastic sleeve. She did not touch the letter right away. "I never knew what to make of it," she said. "The officials told me there had been a mix-up, that Aaron was fine but unreachable because of a classified assignment. Then they told me to stop asking questions for my own peace. But a mother's peace does not come from silence." Marcus leaned forward. "May I?" She nodded. He lifted the letter carefully. Aaron's handwriting filled the page in clean, slanted lines. "Mom, if this reaches you, do not panic. I am safe for now. There is confusion around the K9 transport and Captain Reed's evacuation. Blizzard knows the route better than anyone. If I cannot get this through the right hands, I will leave markers where Reed will understand them. Tell him I kept my word as far as God allowed me." Marcus stopped reading. His eyes burned, but he kept his voice even. Blizzard rose and came to his side, pressing his head against Marcus's knee. Eleanor watched them both. "There was more," she said. Aaron believed records had been changed to hide a mistake. Not a cruel mistake, maybe, but one that left men and animals unaccounted for. He was trying to fix it without ruining anyone who was simply afraid. Marcus lowered the letter. That sounded like Aaron. Not vengeance. Not fury. Just truth with mercy still attached. Eleanor reached into the folder and pulled out a small photograph. It showed Aaron standing by an old maintenance shed near a sagging fence. Beside him stood Blizzard, bright and alert, one paw lifted as if ready to move. On the back, Aaron had written one line. "If Reed comes, bring him to the shed before sunrise." Marcus looked toward the window. Night pressed softly against the glass. The road outside was dark. Blizzard stared at the photograph, then toward the door, body quiet, eyes awake. Eleanor folded her hands in her lap. "Captain," she said, and for the first time her voice carried the strength Aaron must have inherited, "my son trusted you. That dog trusted you enough to find your home. Whatever is waiting at that shed, I think it has waited long enough." Marcus stood slowly, the letter in his hand, the ache in his shoulder forgotten beneath something steadier than pain. He looked at Blizzard, then at Eleanor Cole, a mother with coffee cooling in the kitchen and faith still burning behind tired eyes. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. "We leave before dawn." Before sunrise, the world outside Eleanor Cole's house was still and colorless, caught in that quiet hour when even birds seemed to wait before trusting the day. Marcus stood by the truck with a travel mug of coffee warming his hand, watching pale mist gather along the ditch beside the lane. His shoulder had stiffened overnight, and the old ache moved through him with every breath, but it no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a reminder that he was still here, still able to answer when loyalty called his name. Eleanor came out wearing a dark coat over her blue dress, her silver hair tucked beneath a wool hat, Aaron's folder held against her chest. "I am coming with you," she said before Marcus could speak. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Blizzard stood between them, white coat glowing faintly in the porch light, amber eyes moving from Marcus to Eleanor and back again. Marcus wanted to tell her it might be too hard, that the road was uneven, that the old depot was cold and forgotten and carried more questions than comfort. But one look at her hands closed around the folder stopped him. A mother does not wait at the edge of truth after waiting so long in the dark. He opened the passenger door. "Yes, ma'am." She climbed in slowly, and Blizzard settled in the back seat with his head resting over the console, close enough for Eleanor to touch. She did, lightly, with 2 fingers along the bridge of his nose. "You found him," she whispered. "You found the one Aaron trusted." Blizzard closed his eyes for a moment, as if receiving the blessing and carrying it inward. They drove in silence through the waking edge of Jacksonville, past dark gas stations, quiet subdivisions, and fields silvered with frost. By the time they reached County Road 19, a thin line of gold had begun to form beyond the pines. Marcus felt the road change beneath the tires before he saw the mile markers. Smooth pavement gave way to cracked asphalt, then to the rough shoulder near the rusted chain. Mile 47 leaned in the gray light like an old witness asked to testify at last. Blizzard stood before the truck came to a full stop. Marcus stepped out first, then helped Eleanor down. She took one look at the maintenance road disappearing into the trees and drew a slow breath. "Aaron hated leaving things unfinished," she said. Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He did. They passed the chain and entered the pines, Blizzard leading but keeping his pace gentle enough for Eleanor. The woods smelled of wet bark, cold soil, and the faint metallic tang of rust from the abandoned fence. Morning gathered slowly above them, turning the mist blue, then silver. They reached the culvert where Marcus had found the pouch, then continued along the red line from Aaron's map. Every few yards, Blizzard paused and checked the ground, sometimes circling, sometimes lifting his nose to read what the wind still carried. Marcus watched him work and felt an old ache in the heart, not from pain, but from pride. Blizzard had been more than trained. He had been entrusted. At the back fence, the maintenance sheds appeared through the trees, 3 low structures with corrugated metal roofs, their paint faded to the color of old bone. Vines crawled over the doors. A broken security light hung above the center shed. Blizzard stopped before the 3rd one. He sat, not alerting to danger, not backing away, just sitting, solemn and certain, facing the door as if he had brought them to a chapel. Eleanor's breath caught. Marcus stepped forward and examined the latch. It was secured with a small combination lock, rusted but intact. He looked at the photograph from Aaron's folder. On the back, beneath the note, there were 4 tiny numbers written in the corner, so faint he had missed them before. 1127. Marcus turned the dials. The lock opened with a soft snap. Eleanor pressed one hand to her mouth. Marcus lifted the latch and pulled the door open. Dust breathed out, catching the early light. Inside, the shed was mostly empty. A workbench, 2 cracked plastic bins, a stack of old traffic cones, a rolled tarp, and along the far wall, a metal footlocker with Aaron Cole's name written on a strip of tape across the lid. Blizzard walked to it and lay down beside it, placing his chin on his paws. He had reached the end of the trail. Marcus knelt and opened the footlocker. No weapons. No dark secret meant to destroy lives. Only records, photographs, medical transfer logs, a second collar tag, and a small digital recorder sealed in a plastic bag. On top lay one more envelope addressed in Aaron's handwriting. To read, Mrs. Cole, and the people who still believe mistakes should be corrected before they become graves. Marcus looked at Eleanor. She nodded. He opened it. The letter explained what Aaron had found. A paperwork failure during a coastal storm, a rushed transport order, a K-9 unit logged under the wrong identification number, and a wounded civilian contractor left without proper follow-up because no one wanted to admit the route had been mishandled. Aaron had not been hiding from duty. He had been gathering proof quietly, trying to protect the innocent and give the forgotten a way home. Then his reassignment had come suddenly, and he feared the trail would vanish. So he trusted Blizzard, the dog who knew the route, the dog who knew Marcus, the dog who would not forget. Eleanor sank onto an overturned crate, holding the letter to her chest. Tears slipped down her face, silent and unashamed. He was still being Aaron, she whispered. Marcus could not answer. His throat was too tight. Blizzard rose, crossed to Eleanor, and rested his head in her lap. She bent over him, fingers buried in his white fur, and the first sunlight entered the shed through a crack in the wall, falling across all three of them like something gentle being returned. The recorder lay in Marcus's palm, small and dust-covered, yet it seemed to weigh more than the footlocker itself. Eleanor sat on the overturned crate with Blizzard's head resting against her knee, her fingers moving slowly through his white fur as if each stroke steadied the room. Morning light slipped through the broken seams of the shed, touching the workbench, the old traffic cones, the faded tape on Aaron's footlocker, and the envelope that had carried the truth across months of silence. Marcus looked at Eleanor before pressing play. She nodded once. The recorder clicked, hissed, and then Aaron Cole's voice filled the little shed. It was softer than Marcus remembered, thinner with tiredness, but unmistakably his. Reed, if you are hearing this, then Blizzard did what I knew he would do. Good dog. Blizzard lifted his head at the sound. His ears rose. His body went perfectly still. Eleanor's hand froze in his fur. On the recording, Aaron gave a small breath that was almost a laugh. I am sorry this took the long way home. I tried the proper channels first. You know me. Paperwork, signatures, patient questions, all the things that are supposed to keep people honest. But the route logs were changed after the storm, and Blizzard was marked under another unit number. That would have sent him far away from you, and the civilian contractor we picked up near the old depot would have disappeared into a file with no name attached. I could not let that happen. Marcus closed his eyes, not because the truth surprised him, but because Aaron's voice carried the same calm. Mercy it had carried in every hard hour they had shared. There was no bitterness in it, no hunger to punish, only a steady insistence that forgotten people and forgotten animals still mattered. The recording continued. The contractor's name is Samuel Price. He was not part of anything wrong. He was an old maintenance worker who knew the road better than command did, and he helped us when the transfer got turned around in the storm. He gave Blizzard water from his own thermos and kept saying the dog looked like he belonged to somebody who needed him. He was right. Eleanor bowed her head. A tear fell silently onto the back of her hand. Marcus opened his eyes and stared at the recorder as Aaron spoke again. Samuel was taken to a county clinic under the wrong initials. Nothing dramatic. No great conspiracy like in the movies. Just tired people, bad weather, rushed decisions, and one mistake stacked on another until a man and a dog could be lost without anyone meaning to lose them. That is how most wrong things happen, Reed. Not always from cruelty. Sometimes from people being too scared to admit they made a mess. Marcus felt those words settle deep. They were harder than anger. They required something better from him. The recorder crackled. If I cannot fix this myself, take the folder to Major Whitaker at Camp Lejeune. Not the office line. Go in person. He is fair, and he still remembers what accountability is supposed to look like. Then find Samuel Price. He may still be at Cedar Hollow Recovery outside Wilmington. His sister kept calling, but her messages were being routed to the wrong desk. Get him home if you can. The message paused, and in the silence, a bird began singing outside the shed, one bright note against the cold morning. Then Aaron's voice returned, lower now. Mom, if you are there, I am sorry. I know you taught me not to borrow tomorrow's grief, but I also know you will worry anyway. Do not carry this like a stone. I am doing what you raised me to do. I am telling the truth as kindly as I can. Eleanor pressed the letter to her chest and whispered, Oh, Aaron. Blizzard rose slowly and stepped toward the recorder, nose extended, ears trembling at the familiar voice. Aaron's final words came through the speaker like a prayer recorded in the dark. Blizzard, if you hear me, find Reed. He will understand you. Reed, if he finds you, believe him before you believe the paper. Some promises need pause to finish them. Bring him home, brother. Bring them all home. The recorder clicked off. No one moved. The little shed held the silence the way a church holds the last note of a hymn. Marcus lowered the recorder to his lap. Blizzard touched his nose to it once, then turned to Marcus and placed one paw on his boot. It was the same signal he used to give before a search, the quiet request to continue. Marcus looked at Eleanor. Her face was wet with tears, but her eyes were clear. "We go to Camp Lejeune," she said. Marcus nodded. Then Cedar Hollow. They packed the footlocker carefully, every document, photograph, tag, note, and recording placed back as if handling relics. Marcus carried it with both arms despite the pain that flared in his shoulder, because some burdens deserved to be felt. Outside, the sun had risen above the trees, turning the damp grass silver. Blizzard walked beside them, slower now, the journey finally showing in his tired steps. At the truck, Eleanor paused and looked back at the shed. "He did not leave us with answers only," she said. "He left us with work." Marcus set the footlocker in the truck bed and secured it beneath a blanket. "Yes, ma'am," he said, "and we are going to finish it." Blizzard climbed into the back seat and lay down at last, his head resting near the second collar tag from the footlocker. Marcus closed the door gently. As they drove away from mile marker 47, the woods receded behind them, no longer a place of fear, but a place where a loyal dog had kept faith with a promise until the people were ready to hear it. By the time Marcus turned toward Camp Lejeune, the morning had grown bright and clean, the kind of Carolina morning that made the world look forgiven before anyone had asked. Eleanor sat beside him with Aaron's folder resting across her lap, one hand on top of it, the other reaching back to touch Blizzard whenever the road grew quiet. Blizzard lay across the rear seat now, not asleep, but resting with the solemn awareness of a dog who had done more than anyone could measure. His white coat caught the sunlight through the window and glowed softly against the dark upholstery. Marcus drove with both hands steady on the wheel. The footlocker was secured in the truck bed, covered by an old blanket, but he could feel its presence as clearly as if it sat between them. Papers, photographs, a recording, a promise. The gate at Camp Lejeune rose ahead under a wide blue sky. Marcus had passed through military gates most of his adult life, but this time felt different. He was not coming in as a man reporting for duty. He was coming in as a witness, with a grieving mother beside him and a white K9 carrying the last honest map. At the checkpoint, the young Marine on duty glanced at Marcus's identification, then at Eleanor, then at Blizzard in the back seat. His expression changed when he saw the dog's collar tag. Not recognition exactly. Respect. "Have a good day, Captain," he said, handing the card back. Marcus nodded. "You too, Marine." Major Thomas Whitaker's office was in a brick administration building near the training fields, where the sound of cadence drifted faintly through the open air. Whitaker was older than Marcus remembered, with gray at the temples and deep lines around eyes that had not learned to look away from hard truths. He listened without interruption as Marcus placed the folder, the map, the tag, the recorder, and the letter on his desk. Eleanor sat upright, her hands folded. Blizzard rested at Marcus's feet, head up, watching the major as if judging whether this man could be trusted with Aaron's work. When the recording ended, Whitaker remained silent for a long time. Outside, boots struck pavement in rhythm, distant and steady. Finally, the major removed his glasses and set them on the desk. "Staff Sergeant Cole was one of the finest Marines I ever had the privilege to know," he said quietly. "And if this is what he found, then we are going to correct the record." Eleanor closed her eyes. The words did not bring Aaron home. Nothing could. But truth has its own kind of shelter, and, for the first time, she seemed able to stand beneath it. Whitaker made the calls himself. Not the kind that disappeared into office lines. Direct calls. Names spoken. Dates confirmed. A transport number pulled. A county clinic contacted. Then Cedar Hollow recovery. Marcus watched the major's face as the final connection went through. "Samuel Price?" Whitaker said. He listened, then looked up. "Alive. Recovering. Discharged records incomplete. Family never properly notified." Eleanor let out a soft sound, halfway between grief and gratitude. Blizzard rose before anyone said his name. Marcus looked down at him. "You already knew." The dog's tail moved once. By late afternoon, they reached Cedar Hollow Recovery outside Wilmington, a low building surrounded by pine trees and winter-bear crepe myrtles. The place smelled of antiseptic, cafeteria coffee, and warm laundry. A nurse led them to a sunroom where an older man sat near the window with a blanket over his knees. Samuel Price had thinning gray hair, tired blue eyes, and hands that looked shaped by decades of tools and honest work. When Blizzard entered, Samuel sat straighter. "Snow Dog," he whispered. Blizzard crossed the room and placed his head gently on the man's lap. Samuel's hand trembled as it settled on the dog's fur. "I told him you belonged to somebody," he said. Marcus knelt beside him. "You helped him get back." Samuel shook his head slowly. "No, sir. He helped me stay found." That evening, after calls were made and Samuel's sister was finally reached, after Eleanor heard Whitaker promise a full correction of the record, after Marcus signed the statement Aaron had deserved months ago, they returned to the little blue house on Alder Creek Lane. The sun was setting pink over the rooftops. Marcus opened the front door, and Blizzard stepped inside, as if he had always known this was where the road would end. Not with applause, not with medals, not with the kind of victory people cheer for. Just a water bowl filled fresh, a blanket spread near the couch, and a tired Marine sitting on the floor beside a white German shepherd who had carried a message farther than words could go. Eleanor stood in the doorway, holding Aaron's second collar tag. She pressed it into Marcus's palm. "He wanted your dog home," she said. Marcus looked at Blizzard. "He wanted all of us home." The dog rested his head against Marcus's knee, eyes closing at last. Outside, the neighborhood settled into evening. Somewhere, a church bell rang once, then faded into the soft Carolina air. Marcus sat very still, feeling the warmth of Blizzard's body beside him and the small metal tag in his hand. Loyalty had remembered what paperwork forgot. Mercy had found a road through silence. And sometimes, the message that changes everything does not arrive loud. Sometimes it comes home on tired paws, waits at your gate, and asks only that you believe love still knows the way.